So good to have you join us today. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Lee Ji-yoon in Seoul. Coming up on today's edition of Business Daily. Chicken prices have been soaring in the recent months due to a massive bird flu outbreak, prompting the government to take action against those trying to reap undue gains. The ouster of former President Park Geun-hye might have cleared away political uncertainty for now, but the Korean economy still faces challenges from both at home and abroad. We'll sit down with an expert to talk about this. But first, let's take a look at how the markets fared here in Seoul today. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi rose 0.76% to hit 2,133, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq was down 0.24% at 614.12. This follows a record-high opening of nearly 2,130 this morning, which was about 0.45% higher than yesterday's close. In terms of foreign-owned stocks, the combined market cap of offshore investors hit an all-time high, exceeding $444 billion as of Monday. Korea Exchange says a net $3.7 billion worth of stocks have been snapped up by foreigners this year alone, particularly gaining momentum in March. Experts say this comes as Korean stocks still remain relatively undervalued, and they project the buying spree may continue following the removal of political uncertainty. Both export and import prices here in Korea fell in February on a strengthening won. According to preliminary data from the Bank of Korea on Tuesday, Korea's export prices fell 1.6% in February from the month before. The central bank said this was mainly due to the strengthening won, which gained 3.4% against the greenback on month, logging an average 1,144 won. Import prices dropped more than 2% last month as manufacturers were able to purchase raw materials at lower prices. And the country's grocery costs are on the rise. According to Korea Agro-Fisheries and Food Trade Corporation, mainly prices of meat and seafood products have been surging, largely due to infectious diseases like the bird flu and foot and mouth disease. For one, the retail price of 100 grams of Korean beef rose over 2% as of Monday compared to the same time last year, while pork belly jumped over 5%. When it came to seafood like cutlass fish, prices climbed as much as 36% to about $11. And chicken has been no exception in the trend of climbing prices. But the government is threatening a tax probe on fried chicken joints that raise prices on the pretext of the bird flu. Our Eunice Kim explains why.
As Korea deals with the aftermath of its worst bird flu epidemic to date, chicken prices have been ticking up on supply concerns. The producer price of 1 kilogram of the bird has climbed about 1,000 won as of Friday from a year earlier, while the wholesale cost has jumped by more than 50% to eclipse 4,000 won.
Yes, I'm worried that chicken will become too expensive and that I'll have to find something else to eat.
As prices slide up, one domestic fried chicken franchise, BBQ, decided to raise its menu prices starting Monday, with others potentially following suit. On that news, the Food Ministry, concerned, issued a warning on this Tuesday, arguing bird flu was no more than an excuse for restaurants to expand their bottom line at the expense of their customers. It explained restaurants purchase their stock at an interval of 6 months to a year ahead of time, thus are not exposed to the current price fluctuations. Add in the extra logistical billables and a chicken at a cost of under 3,500 won, it says only accounts for about 20% of the price paid by the customer. Noting menu prices did not go down when whole prices did, the Food Ministry said feeling the need to adjust now looks questionable and could solicit a probe by the National Tax Service. This as the government has been acting to ease a potential supply issue. It's released 2,000 tons of birds out of storage, with more than 10,000 more tons to come from private stockpiles. The Food Ministry is also set to temporarily suspend an import tax on chickens starting next month. Meanwhile, the price of eggs has been showing signs of stabilization, coming in at the 7,200 won range as of Friday. This as egg supply, for a time interrupted by a stoppage on U.S. imports, is steadying with imports coming from Australia and New Zealand. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
With former President Park Geun-hye's impeachment last Friday, a lot of attention is now on what path the Korean economy will be taking from here on out. Will Korea be able to get a fresh start on its economic reforms again? To tell us more about this, Professor Yang Jun-suk from the Catholic University of Korea joins us in the studio today. So good to see you.
Happy to be here.
All right, so to start us off, it's only been a few days, but have we seen any changes to the local economy since the impeachment ruling on Friday? And also, do you think it will help lift consumer sentiment?
Okay, well, I think there has been some limited signs of optimism. There has been some signs that consumption has risen. There has been, generally, people have been relieved that this has finished fairly well, even though there's some pockets of some resistance here and there. Having said that, though, I think to count on this to improve consumption in a major way, I think is premature. Okay. Because, well, the basic long-term cost, the structural cause of low consumption is still it still remains. People are still scared about what to do after retirement, and in the short term, we still have fairly low demand. Luckily, export is picking up, but because it has fallen to very low in the last 2 years, right. It's still climbing back up to the level that it used to be. So I think that consumption is going to pick up, but at least until after the elections, it'll be slow.
Okay. Now, Friday's ruling also brought about rather optimistic views on the country, especially from global financial analysts. And global credit rating agency Moody's said that Park's impeachment is positive for Korea's credit rating. Why so?
Okay, well, you really don't want the economy to depend on very few key people, because when that key people make mistakes, then the economy may fall apart. I think what this showed the global economy is that Korea is now working with a set of rules, so it doesn't depend on few individuals. But we're working under the rule of law, and if there's a problem, then there's a process for us to get through. Right. So I think that gives more confidence that Korea does not depend on just few individuals.
Now, what's going to happen then to much of the reforms, bills, or policies that have been put forth by former President Park Geun-hye? I mean, are much of them going to be put on hold, or what impact would all these have on related industries and businesses if these bills are put on hold? Okay,
well, I think the bills like the labor bills, those are probably going to be on hold and perhaps even be rejected because, well, the parties that are natural supporters for these type of bills, the Conservative Party, they're going to have a very difficult time in the elections. Regulatory reform measures, they'll probably stop at least for a while because the opposition side has been very suspicious about regulatory reform. Structural reform, I think they will not have a choice but to accept a lot of it because the shipping industry, the maritime transport, the shipbuilding industry is in such a bad shape to begin with. But they may use some, they may emphasize different aspects of restructuring.
Now, but then Korea, until Korea elects its next president, Korea's economic team will have to wade through a lot of issues without a leader.
Yeah, that concerns me quite a bit because, well, if you look at the complaints that the politicians had about the economic team so far, whenever they try to make a bold move, they try to limit it because, well, this is a temporary government headed by an acting president. So it should not make too many bold moves. It should leave it up to the next elected leader. On the other hand, whenever they don't make those kind of bold moves, when there's a foreign shock and they don't make those type of moves, then they also complain. Right. Why aren't you doing things that are necessary to do? And I think this problem will remain until the elections are over. So even if the economic team under the acting president wants to try some bold things, I don't think they're going to have the support at least until after the elections.
Now, eyes are also on what economic pledges are going to be put forth by potential presidential candidates. So what impact will an earlier than expected presidential election have on the Korean economy?
Okay, well, good thing is once the elections are over, the uncertainty is over.
Okay.
But the bad thing is the election has been so sudden and the campaign time is so short. And because, frankly, I don't think economic issues are going to play a lot in this particular election. Because there's so many more important things dealing with foreign relations, North Korea, South Korea relations, that economic issues are probably going to take a back seat to political issues. So that's one problem. The second problem is that, as I mentioned, the campaign period is short, and then there's going to be no period of transition. As soon as the elections are over, that person is going to be installed as the president.
Right.
So there's really not that much time to develop policy. So we haven't seen that many details about what policies we're going to have so far. We know some ideas that some of the candidates have. I think most of the candidates on the liberal side, who are the front runners, they have more emphasis on welfare. They perhaps put more emphasis on more universal type of welfare subsidies and more direct control of chaebars. But we don't know the details yet.
Okay.
So we're going to have to wait on that.
Now, there are also projections that there will be no more rate cuts, but more expansionary fiscal policies. Would you agree?
I would have to agree. It seems very likely that the United States will raise the interest rate next week. And if the U.S. recovery goes as it currently is, and in addition to whatever expansionary policy President Trump may bring to the table, we'll probably have to raise the interest rate a few times again this year, at least once, probably more than once. And that means the policy rate for U.S. and Korea will be virtually the same. So Korea will have no opportunities to cut the policy rate. Really, Korea cannot afford to have its policy rate below the United States. We run a risk of a very fast capital outflow. So I think monetary policy is pretty much off the table. That means there's only fiscal policy left.
Now, like you said, there are a lot of external risks, like the potential U.S. Fed rate hike, as well as Trump's protectionist policies, despite these political uncertainties being cleared away. So what's your outlook on the local economy from here on out, and how should Korea prepare to minimize the negative impact?
Okay, well, the first thing you have to do is, because the Korean interest rate is so close to U.S. interest rate, we have to see if there's going to be a rapid capital outflow. I mentioned here several times, but if the capital outflow is slow, then Korea can probably handle it. We have enough foreign reserves and our fundamentals are fairly solid. So if the capital outflow is slow, then we can handle it. But if it gets too rapid, then that runs the risk of currency crisis. So we're going to have to monitor that very well. And then, as we mentioned, now the focus is going to be on fiscal policy, but fiscal policy has to be dealt very carefully. My recommendation would be that we look at Japan and the United States, what they did with their fiscal policy. I think Japan made a crucial mistake in just trying to build infrastructure everywhere.
Okay.
And that got them stuck with a lot of infrastructure that they didn't need. It may have helped them in the first few months when they started building it, but after they built it, it just became a waste on government funds. So we should try to refrain ourselves from building too much infrastructure, especially based on balanced country growth type of plans. And then if you look at the United States, it wasn't big enough to stop the recession, but the way that they gave out the government expenditure to people who are, say, temporarily out of job or threatened to be temporarily out of jobs, and then to the people who are unemployed. Those type of people, when they receive money from the government, they consume most of it. And what Korea needs right now more than anything else is consumption.
Right.
So that type of non-universal welfare subsidy given to targeted specific people who will spend the money rather than save it. I think that's what we need, but those type of policies are very hard to come by during election times.
Right, which we'll be seeing the presidential election sometime in May, right?
Right.
All right, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end, but we'll be back tomorrow at the same time with the day's top business stories, so don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching and see you soon.